SLT Fibre and experience the power of fibre technology. Sri Lanka's only super fast internet connection. SLT Fibre. Call 1212 now.
Tonight, 12 is too young. British High Commissioner welcomes changes to the Muslim Marriage and Divorce Act, but highlights the path for reform.
Change which particularly affects one community is best led from within that community.
A roundtable discussion. South Asia should look beyond political geography in addressing security concerns.
I think we need to look at the entire South Asia as much as possible to look at the continuums of space.
Voice of disappointment. Minister of Plantation Industries airs grievances.
I'm embarrassed to say that my own finance minister at that time tried to take my money.
Destitution or greed. An oil tanker explodes, killing at least 60 people. All that and much more coming up on First at 9 this Saturday, the 10th of August, 2019.
මුහුණ සති කීපයකට කලින් Fair and Lovely men ගෑවට පස්සේ මාක්ස් අඩු වෙලා ෆෙයානස් වැඩි වෙලා.
මාක්ස් අඩු කරලා ඔයාගේ ෆෙයානස් ස්ටෑන්ඩඩ් එක වැඩි කරගන්න. Fair and Lovely men anti-marks cream.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to First at 9. I'm Thamik Naga. Let's start with your local stories. Now, Defence Secretary retired General Shantha KOTTEGODA is buoyant about the progress made in the renovation work of the Zion Church in BATTICALOA, which was destroyed in the Easter Sunday attacks. He expressed these views while engaging in an inspection tour at the church this morning, accompanied by Army Commander Lieutenant General Mahesh Senanayake.
Secretary of Defence retired General Shantha KOTTEGODA and Army Commander Lieutenant General Mahesh Senanayake engaged in an inspection tour at the Zion Church in BATTICALOA, which was destroyed by the Easter Sunday attacks. The renovation work of the church is currently being carried out by the Army.
To see how things are, how peaceful BATTICALOA is, and also to visit the troops who did an extremely commendable task soon after the Easter Sunday attack. So I think I'm quite happy that things have come back to normalcy.
Yes.
Now, Bangladesh High Commissioner to Sri Lanka Riaz Hamidullah believes that countries need to look beyond their political geography to address issues pertaining to security in the South Asian region. His views came at a roundtable discussion hosted by the Institute of National Security Studies Sri Lanka on transnational security issues in South Asia.
Someone who is radicalized, someone who is harboring or in the process of getting transformed into extremist views, you can't identify. Do you think that living in open society, liberal values, post-421 situation, do you find that it's more constraining for you?
It is very difficult to identify or differentiate whether he's a radicalized person or a normal person. But that is the main issue. That is why Sri Lankan people, they suspect the entire community, entire Muslim community as terrorists. Even if we arrest them, it is very difficult because according to our normal system, we have to prosecute them if we can't produce any evidence against him. That is the major issue now we are facing, because after a certain period of time we have to send them back to society. We can't give a certain assurance whether that person is really a de-radicalized person.
I think that's why things like community engagement and community policing are so crucial, because there are subtle signs of radicalization that the people around that person are going to know most intimately, whether it's the community leaders or religious leaders, family and friends. And without that community engagement, if you have isolated and marginalised and discriminated groups of people, which tends to happen more with things like the burqa ban, that's where radicalisation becomes a hotspot. But when you have this top-down community engagement, that's where you hear things and police get tips and police hear things, and it can go up the chain of law enforcement to the point where you have communities who want to identify those who have been radicalised. So I think what Bangladesh is doing, it blows my mind, because it's something that Australia still struggles with.
Whether a country like Bangladesh or Sri Lanka or Maldives can have our own strategy when it comes to security, despite India's domination.
Having seen South Asia past 2 decades or so. An objective approach and response would be, let me go back to something that Pierre Trudeau said. He was once asked, how does it feel like to be next to a big neighbor? His response was, it feels like a big elephant who is sighing on your shoulder. You feel it, but you look ahead. My sense is that we need to work hand in hand on a whole entire spectrum of security issues. I think we need to look at the entire South Asia as much as possible, as much as the sovereignty and flexibility of our institutional frameworks, regulatory frameworks allow, to look at the continuums of space. If we go in terms of application of this political geography, we will be constricted in addressing it.
The United Kingdom welcomes the proposed amendments to the Muslim Marriage and Divorce Act of 1951, emphasising that changes which affect one community is best led from within that particular community so they do not seem obtrusive. Joining for his last television discussion in Sri Lanka, British High Commissioner James Torres expressed these views to Indiviri Amuatta on our current affairs programme at Hyde Park on AdaDerana 24. Speaking further, the outgoing British High Commissioner also raised concerns on President Maithripala Sirisena's decision to reenact the death penalty.
The Muslim Marriage and Divorce Act, this kind of legislation, what is your view in terms of having such legislation for a particular community?
Muslim and Marriage and Divorce Act is a particular piece of legislation which applies to the Muslim community only, and for viewers who aren't familiar with it, amongst other things, it permits the marriage of Muslim children as young as the age of 12, and it sets up a separate system of rules for divorce and for decisions on custody of children. We say in the UK that the law is for everyone, and it's a law which at a secular level does not distinguish between communities by reason of different people's faiths. I think that almost all of your viewers will agree that 12, frankly, is too young to marry. And we, that is the state and the law, have a responsibility to protect young children from marriage at a, I would say, inappropriately young age. I do welcome the reflection that I know from conversations with many Muslim friends is taking place within the community about change to the Muslim Marriage and Divorce Act. Change which particularly affects one community is best led from within that community, and it avoids the sense that a change which not everyone might welcome is being imposed from the outside. But I think that's really positive within the community.
Will the United Kingdom look at any further dialogue, or maybe even to press Sri Lanka to get rid of such legislation?
As I say, I do think these debates are best led from within the country. We can offer advice, we can share views as friends. The picture that some people like to paint of hostile international interference is wrong. It's something we certainly, my government, works very carefully to avoid. So I think that while we're happy to contribute to a discussion, if our views are sought, that ambition for change needs to come within, and particularly from within affected communities.
Particularly even after the war, the UK, the United States, as well as European nations came together to hold Sri Lanka accountable for certain allegations of war crimes, violations of human rights. Can you not take a look at issues as a violation of a child's right here through the implementation of a law that is not compatible with international laws?
We regularly do raise it, and I think just through raising topics, we set out our views and our hopes. And another area which you haven't mentioned is the death penalty. It's another topic that I've been talking about, and I know many other ambassadors and high commissioners in Sri Lanka have also been talking about as an area of concern. At the end of the day, it's Sri Lanka's sovereign decision whether or not to implement the death penalty, but we very much hope, as we have made consistently clear, that the long-standing moratorium on the use of the death penalty will be maintained here, because a lot of research from around the world shows that the death penalty is not an effective deterrent for the sorts of crimes it's often provided for as a possible sentence.
Moving on with other stories, the Ceylon Electricity Board is confident that the average generation cost of a unit of electricity could be brought down to 15 to 16 rupees from the existing cost, which exceeds 23 rupees. Speaking at an event held in Colombo recently, Subject Minister RAVI KARUNANAYAKE said that the process, however, is laborious, but it's something his ministry is willing to undertake.
All we can basically say is the CEP is doing its very best to ensure that we reduce the exorbitant charges that we impose on the consumer. But we are compelled owing to the wrong policies that we have adhered. We have been charging owing to the fact that our generation is expensive. So it is our intention of my ministry, my state minister and our government to reduce the generating cost. Today the average cost is 23.70. When this can well afford be brought down to 15-16 rupees. But the process is laborious, arduous, and it is very dangerously placed. But we have got to take that difficult decision as soon as possible, and we are on that course. When we reduce it to 16 rupees, our generating cost, then the bills doesn't need to be increased, it can be reduced. Our losses will be evaporated because at the end of the day, there are limited resources which are basically allocated among the unbelievable amount of demands that are there. So on that course, the limited resources divided among these limited scarce resources will ensure that the priorities are given and it taken in the correct direction.
President Maithripala Sirisena, who is engaged in an official tour of Cambodia, said today that a Sri Lankan mission will be established in Cambodia in an attempt to strengthen democratic relations between the two countries. The head of state, who is the first Sri Lankan president to engage in an official tour in Cambodia, added at a religious ceremony at the Wat Lanka Preah Kosmoram in Phnom Penh that the two Buddhist nations must work together to spread teachings of Theravada Buddhism throughout the world. President Sirisena also joined in planting a Nar sapling at the venue in solidarity with Cambodia. The King, the Prime Minister and the government of Cambodia have already pledged their support to spread Theravada Buddhism, and the process will be taken forward with the assistance of Mahasangha of the two countries. The President had also said that discussions on the expansion of investment and trade activities between Sri Lanka and Cambodia have successfully concluded. An invitation has also been extended to the Cambodian Prime Minister by President Sirisena to visit Sri Lanka at the earliest opportunity. Now, the National Convention of the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna is all set to be held tomorrow at the Sugatadasa Indoor Stadium in Colombo. Politicians of the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna visited the venue this afternoon to observe the preparations for tomorrow's convention. During tomorrow's event, leader of the opposition Mahinda Rajapaksa will be officially declared the leader of the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna, and he, in his capacity as the leader of the party, will announce their presidential candidate. Now, this comes at a time where the United National Party is split over their presidential candidate, with its members swaying between its leader Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe and party's deputy leader Sajith Premadasa. Some also say that the Speaker Karu Jayasuriya has also thrown his hat into the ring. A suspected burglar who had jumped off from the third floor of a house in Derana in Mattakullia has died after being handed over to the police. The deceased, who is said to be a breaking and entering suspect, had jumped off from the three-storied house when a woman who had noticed him began screaming. He had been crawling towards the gate when the residents of the area captured him. The suspect was then handed over to the Mattakullia police in the early hours today, but had died between 8 and 9 a.m. while still in police custody. The relatives of the deceased later gathered before the police station, accusing that the death is the result of the police assaulting him. Police media spokesperson SP Ruwan Gunasekara stated that Colombo North Police Division has launched an investigation into the incident. We're going to move in for a very short break, and when we come back, more news. Welcome back. You're watching First at 9. Now, Minister of Plantation Industries Navin Dissanayake points out that the research institutions related to the plantation industry are underfunded and that only around 40 to 50 million rupees is spent in capital funding. The minister was speaking at the 125th anniversary celebration of the Colombo Tea Traders Association last evening. He also revealed some other challenges which sprang up from within the government.
The 125th anniversary of the Colombo Tea Traders Association celebrated in Colombo last night under the auspices of Subject Minister Navin Dissanayake. The commemorative publication titled Tea-Men, which records a well-researched history of the association, was also launched on the night.
The challenges that we faced were many. Particularly, I'm embarrassed to say that my own finance minister at that time tried to take my money, funds that belong to the exporters, that we have collected as a tea levy. We resisted that and we have that still in Nakiti. The glyphosate issue, the weedicide issue, you call it whatever you want, a self-imposed problem that should never have arisen. As you know, I have always taken the position, the correct position, that is that commercial agriculture needs a weedicide. These decisions cannot be imposed on an industry that is 150 years old. It has to be taken on a scientific basis. And the tea board has been given very hard instructions to come down very hardly on those people who abuse the tea industry. Up to now, during the past 2 years, we have actually stopped the production of 13 factories who have been caught with adding substances to tea. And I urge whoever takes my place next year to follow that policy.
Minister Dissanayake also spoke about the criticism and failures of the industry during the past 4 years.
I would like to reflect on some of the criticisms and the failures of the past 4 years. Many have said the lack of reform in the industry, but reforms have to be consensual. It cannot be done from top to the bottom. Therefore, reforms in the RPCs, which I feel are due, could not be done. Especially, my ministry categorized the RPCs into 3 sectors, A, B and C. Majority fell within A and B, but there were some RPCs that were underperforming. There were some RPCs that had broken the rules. Unfortunately for me, there is no penalizing method. So therefore, even if some intervention is sought, there is a loop that had to be overcome. Hopefully in the future we can look at this, but it is an area where I feel we should collectively work together. Another failure I feel is the lack of scientific approach to agriculture and farming and plantations in our country. A classic example is the palm oil industry. Our government gave permission for 20,000 hectares. Actually, the permission came during Mr. Mahinda Rajapaksa's time, and we followed that policy. However, certain vested interests who have no idea about scientific farming and agriculture raise concerns about the adverse effect of the ecology by palm oil. Unfortunately for me, and I say this boldly now, the executive doesn't understand modern agriculture. Whether it's the glyphosate issue or the palm oil issue, cooperation between the executive and my ministry has been very limited.
Now, Sri Lanka could lose access to global debt markets if a new government shifts away from the country's current fiscal policy that's aimed at shoring up the economy and managing inflation. The caution comes from Senior Deputy Governor at the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, Dr. Nandalal Veerasinghe, with the island preparing for a presidential election later this year, with a parliamentary election scheduled thereafter.
With 2 elections in the horizon, there is some degree of uncertainty over Sri Lanka's investment climate. In an interview, Senior Deputy Governor at the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, Dr. Nandalal Veerasinghe, said that the question is whether any new government coming after elections will move in a different direction compared to what this government has been doing for the last 4 years, and if anyone tries to move away from this fiscal macroeconomic stability, they will not have access to global markets. The Reuters reports say that Sri Lankan economy cannot afford to lose access to global markets, as it has to repay more than $16 billion in foreign loans over the next 4 years. In that view, Dr. Veerasinghe says anyone who comes to power will have to make sure Sri Lanka has access to a global investor base so that payments can be met in the next couple of years through market borrowings. Senior Deputy Governor at the Central Bank adds that proposed changes to monetary policy law are expected to win Parliament approval soon, which in turn will help bolster the central bank's independence. He also forecasts 3% growth this year. In May, the central bank reduced the key interest rates by 50 basis points to boost credit growth and the economy, and Veerasinghe says that there was still room to reduce market interest rates, as he doesn't see any reason to tighten at this point.
We're going to move in for a very short break, and when we come back, we take a look at what's happening around the world. Stay tuned. Welcome back. You're watching First at 9. Let's take a look at what's happening around the world. Now, at least 60 people have been killed and 70 people injured in a fuel tank explosion in Tanzania. Pictures showed flaming wreckage scattered over a wide area and charged bodies lying on the ground. Police said people were trying to recover fuel from the vehicle which had overturned on a major road sometime earlier when the blast happened. The incident occurred in the Morogoro region, about 200 kilometers west of the port city of Dar es Salaam. The city of Morogoro is on a major route for transporting cargo and fuel from the port, which is the country's commercial capital. There are fears the death toll could rise. Now, shifting the focus to the east, at least 13 people have been killed and more than 1 million forced from their homes as Typhoon LEKIMA hit China. State media said that 16 people were also missing after a landslide was triggered by the storm. LEKIMA made landfall in early hours today in the Wenling between Taiwan and China's financial capital, Shanghai. The storm was initially designated a super typhoon, but weakened slightly before landfall when it still had wind speeds of 187 kilometers per hour. LEKIMA is now slowly winding its way north through the Zhejiang province and is expected to hit Shanghai, which has a population of over 20 million people. Staying in the region, North Korea has fired 2 missiles into the sea, its 5th such launch in recent weeks. South Korea's military says the missiles are thought to be short-range ballistic missiles. The launches come after US President Donald Trump said he had received a very beautiful letter from North Korean leader Kim Jong-un.
Yeah, he gave me a great letter. I would love to give you, but I don't know. I don't think it would be appropriate, but it was a very personal letter. We talked about what he's doing. He's not happy with the testing. It's a very small testing that we did, but he wasn't happy with the testing. He put that in the letter. But he also sees a great future for North Korea. In the meantime, I say it again, there have been no nuclear tests. The missile tests have all been short range, no ballistic missile tests, no long range missiles. He wasn't happy with the tests, the war games on the other side with the United States. And as you know, I've never liked it either. I've never liked it. I've never been a fan. You know why? I don't like paying for it. We should be reimbursed for it. And I've told that to South Korea, but I don't like it either. But I said do this because this was a big test. This was a turnover of various areas to South Korea. I like that because that's what should happen.
And that's it from all of us here at First at 9. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.